securities.
Didn't you see that interest rates were falling? Yes.
But what in the world is a pension system doing investing in strange and volatile stocks? Strange investments and big losses in a pension system for 92,000 people.
From LPB, this is Louisiana's premier news magazine, with correspondents R.C. Chapa and Jeff Dewey. And your host, Robert Collins.
Good evening. Tonight we'll take a look at an issue which some people are calling economic justice. The issue centers around this question: why are so many industrial plants located near poor and minority communities? That's coming up in part 3 of our look at a controversial proposed hazardous waste plant called SFI. Well, during the past 2 weeks on this program, we have been examining a controversial proposed facility to treat hazardous waste. Its proposed location is on the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But the questions which this issue has raised apply all over the state. In the past year, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency has formulated some new guidelines for plant locations. Those new regs have been applauded by environmentalists. They say that there's a kind of racism and economic injustice in the locating of industrial facilities. This week, R.C. Chapa has the final report in our series on SFI and the larger social issue it raises, economic justice.
Juanita, how long have you lived here in Alsen?
I've lived here just about all my life, say about 40, give or take 40-some years.
You've seen it go through quite a bit of changes.
Yes, I have, especially by the 1970s.
50-year-old Juanita Stewart doesn't know why she was inflicted with a rare disease that almost took her life 3 years ago. She says her doctors don't know either. In 1989, a tumor developed in the blood vessels of her brain. As a result, she suffered severe seizures, memory loss, and paralysis.
That I had to retire from my job at an early age because of this. And there are a lot of other people who are ill and are suffering with different illness. You have sinus problems, you have sore throat, irritation of the eyes, nosebleed. There's an increase in cancer rate, and some rare disease like mine. Mine's rare. It's deal with the nervous system. And at first, I was told that I wasn't going to live, but I'm a survivor.
This condition, when you look it up in the medical journals, it's extremely rare. It's usually discovered on autopsy, and it says it is a reaction to persistent antigens.
Dr. Florence Robinson is a biologist and professor at Southern University. She studies the disproportionate impact of industrial pollution on poor black communities.
The other thing that the literature says that it could be due to certain persistent chemicals. Well, we've got lots of persistent chemicals in our community.
Their community is Alsen, located on the Mississippi River north of Baton Rouge. It lies at the beginning of the 85-mile industrial corridor. Following the Civil War, newly freed slaves from the nearby plantations and other areas settled in Alsen. They lived off the land and hunted and fished in the nearby Devil's Swamp. Its waters produced a wide variety of fish, shellfish, wild game, and fowl. Now the swamp is posted as contaminated with hazardous waste, and people of Alsen are told not to eat any wildlife that comes from any part of the swamp. The air is laced with fumes from the 9 nearby petrochemical plants, 2 Superfund sites, a commercial hazardous waste incinerator, numerous hazardous waste landfills, a lead smelting plant, a waste hauling truck storage and washing facility, and the old and new city garbage dump. This industrial plant provides an eerie backdrop for this city's old cemetery. Industry moved into Alsen during a time when blacks had no access to government and weren't allowed to vote.
They located there because there were no voices to say, no, this might not be a good thing for this community. That decision was made on a racist basis. That is, we were not allowed to speak, and therefore the siting of industries there was a racist act. And it has become entrenched in the system. Once an industry moves into an area, then you begin to think of that area as an industrial area, and you continue to locate industries, and that's exactly what is happening to us. So it's a type of racism that has become institutionalized.
Two studies, one released last month by the Louisiana Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and the other prepared by the EPA's Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, concluded that many of the facilities emitting large amounts of chemicals are in areas with predominantly minority populations. Although the emissions affect everyone, the impact of industrial development, according to the studies, falls disproportionately on predominantly black areas of Louisiana. This is visible between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, where smokestacks and pipelines of oil refineries and petrochemical plants are situated close by predominantly black and poor communities. And now, more industry is planned for Alsen.
The Superfund site wants to have an incinerator now, so they'll just further add to our burden. The city dump is now moved to our community. There is an industrial park planned for Alsen, and there is a section of land that was just recently rezoned from rural to heavy industrial by the city council, in spite of the fact of the evidence that we presented to the zoning commission. So at this point, things just don't look good for Alsen. We're being overwhelmed.
What we've done in Louisiana is we have centralized decision-making about these facilities in Baton Rouge. We've got a statute which gives officials in Baton Rouge the power and the authority to make decisions which dramatically affect little towns and communities and cities all over this state. And we've taken this decision out of these decisions out of the hands of their elected representatives. Well, the trade-off is, if we're going to do that, we absolutely ensure, or we are supposed to, that those little communities and citizens and towns where facilities are proposed to be located have a say in the process. That's the trade-off.
During the previous DEQ administration, attempts were made to put this law to work.
I created this thing called local programs, where we were going to put one person in each parish, and he would report to the police jury or the governing body, and it'd be a little contract between the DEQ and those parishes. And I put about $3 million in my budget. Each year, industry went in the legislature and cut that money out of the budget, out of the DEQ budget. In effect, they were making state policy. So they killed both efforts at trying to get some kind of siting, some rational siting approach in place. Why do they do that? They like it the way it is. It's kind of chaotic and haphazard, and under that kind of scenario, they do best because they're organized, and government is not organized. Public can get organized, but it takes a big effort.
In Alsen, residents have organized around pollution issues affecting the community. They have filed their complaints with DEQ with little results.
It's tough listening to the community and not being able to do anything about it, okay? I mean, it's the most unpleasant part of the job, because we're supposed to be helping the state and helping the community. My staff and I we don't like to see the community upset. We don't like to see people, well, let's put it another way. In a sense, it really doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. They believe they're right, and so the emotions are still there, the distress, the fear, and we don't like to have to deal with it or see it. We wish there was some way that we could address the issues and try to at least narrow it down to real potential problems.
For 29 years, residents in Alsen say their plight has been ignored. They saw no glimmer of hope for their community until recently, when the Environmental Protection Agency's Civil Rights Office entered the conflict between the DEQ and neighbors of the proposed SFI hazardous waste facility. In one of the first federal actions of this type, the EPA informed DEQ that it is investigating the department's handling of the SFI permit application. Neighbors of the site complained that DEQ kept the permit application secret for months and then gave them only a few weeks to intervene. In a meeting with area residents, Iberville Parish Police Juror Leonard Jackson, who filed the complaint, says EPA's letter to DEQ states that programs receiving EPA funds are prohibited from choosing a site or location of a facility that has the purpose or effect of subjecting people to discrimination on the grounds of race, color, national origin, or sex. DEQ receives EPA funds to help operate its hazardous waste permitting program.
It seemed like this is just a dumping ground now. They figure, well, anybody figure they can come in, located in St. Gabriel, Carville, Sunshine area, you know, minority district or a poor economic developed area, and nothing going to be said about it. It was like that a long time ago because we didn't have nobody to stand up for us and fight for us and fight against these people because nobody didn't have the money to do it and we didn't have nobody to represent us to do it. But now it's time for these things to come to a stop. And myself, along with the residents of the community, we're going to do everything we possibly can to try to keep these companies from coming here and just taking over our neighborhood.
To assist in their fight against DEQ, Iberville residents have also recruited the help of the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund. Attorney Robert Weigel, who's also been working on a similar case in Mississippi, says his job will be to make sure the EPA has all the information they need to thoroughly investigate the case.
I think if this same complaint had been made a year ago, I'm not sure that anything would have happened. I think that you do see a willingness to consider this kind of claim at the EPA that you haven't seen before. Whether they are going to actually do something with it, again, remains to be seen. I mean, I think what is important is that the EPA is finally taking cognizance that you shouldn't be subsidizing something with federal taxpayer dollars if it's not being administered in a fair way.
I think the entire environmental movement is sort of redefining democracy in America. I think we've lost it along the way. That government has become an entity unto itself, and it tends to operate without citizens. I think citizens are saying, hey, enough is enough. This is nonsense. We're the ones who count, and listen to us.
The DEQ has told the EPA that their involvement in the SFI case is premature because they haven't made a permit decision. For Juanita, an EPA decision on SFI could set a precedent for her neighborhood.
There's still no word on when the DEQ will act on the SFI permit application. Of course, as the story continues to unfold, we will keep you posted. That is our program for this evening. Next week, R.C. Chapa will be in southwest Louisiana in the Cameron Parish area with a story on how our state's natural beauty is attracting a new kind of visitor. Jeff Dewey will explore some separation of church and state questions as traditional Christians say they are offended by the symbols of Halloween. That'll be next week. Until then, that's the state we're in.